Okay, hello and welcome to another edition of the Supernatural Science Salad Show. We have some regulars here today. It's probably the best intro I've ever done. Anyway, I think we're going to start with the Kent Hovind case. Kent Hovind is been uh, getting into legal trouble again, I guess. Fraud, tax fraud. Do you know more about this, George?
Well, basically only from the newspapers. I read a while back that he got another sentence again because they forgot something a few years back when he was first sentenced in 2007 or something like that, and they forgot something and they're trying to get him on that now, and it seemed to be very important. But I
What
don't.
was it?
Yes, go ahead.
What what was it they forgot?
Well, it's been a few weeks back, and I've only seen the update on what they said in the Magic Sandwich show. So I'm not sure about the exact details, but I think it had to do with what was the exact term? A criminal. Um, how um, hog tie. I think it was that said it so actively. It was a criminal. Um, I think that's what you get when you get not damn. Help me out. I forgot. A criminal.
Well, I mean, I
I remember. I remember the criminal attempt of court or something like that. He had to do something and he didn't do it.
Oh,
Uh,
contempt.
Yes, a criminal attempt of court, and he was set to not do something specifically, but he uh, kept doing it, and because of that, they're trying him again. But as I already said, I don't know the exact details. So perhaps we should have gotten his lawyer here. But basically, the one thing that strikes me already a few years ago, there was a website that aimed at to free Kent Hovind from jail because he is so innocent. But basically, when you read the stuff in the news as a layman and not from a lawyer, not knowing anything about the law, in my eyes, he's guilty as hell, and so he deserves to be in jail. But then you have such a large religious community that stands behind a person like that, knowing he um, did something wrong, and still they want to see him free because he's one of them. And I don't like an attitude that I like that. No.
mean, is it the attitude of once you've been caught red-handed, you tend to play the victim? I mean, the idea that he's only in prison because of his religion and he's being oppressed because of his religious views. I mean, which is obviously ridiculous. As America is a fairly, I mean, I know America is technically a secular country, but it's got quite a high level of Christian religiosity there. So
He wasn't being oppressed. He broke the law for fraud or something, didn't he? I mean, he,
of course his followers are saying that he's being oppressed
he was
because
very retarded.
well, yeah, I guess. Um, so anyway, I don't really know much more about it. Do you want to go
Well,
into
well, I know his son Eric Hovind did a video a few years back. I think 1 or 2 years back, and I think it's still on his channel. I forgot his channel name. Creation Today, I think it was, on their YouTube channel. And they interviewed him, also asking him about his father, and there's one thing that I still remember from that interview, and that's when Eric Hovind said something like that it doesn't matter what happens in this world because we live for the next world. And I think that's a problem a lot of atheists and free thinkers or whatever people kind of like us want to call themselves see as a problem in Christian communities or religious communities in general, that have an attitude for like we don't give a shit about this world because we're all going to die in the end, and we're going to sit next to Jesus and God at the wine table and enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. I think. I mean, you hear this sort of thing quite a lot. I mean, William Lane Craig said this sort of thing. He said I mean, he was basically a hairline away from justifying child murder. Like, wasn't he saying something like the children were the benefit of this infinite good when they were killed, or something along those lines. I mean,
I
I
thought
don't I
that
don't.
was Craig that said that.
Yeah, William Lane Craig, but it's a there's a commonality here. I mean, I don't for a second believe that someone like William Lane Craig would ever be capable of something like that. It's just something that religion makes you do. I mean, it makes you it backs you into a corner, so you have to say things that
No, I think that's a dangerous thing what you just said. You said that they don't believe something like that, but I think
I honestly don't think they do. I mean, I honestly don't think they say things like that, but I honestly don't think they do. I mean, I see sort of like a conflict between their moral compass, and I do believe these people do have a moral compass. I mean, they're not socio, they're not
but that's the problem. First, it's an assumption that you say they won't do something like that, but I'll want to take you back to a European example of 60, 70 years ago, made famous in a lot of movies, called World War II. A lot of people were sent to the concentration camps because they were betrayed by their own neighbors who they knew for years and would consider their friends. And you think, oh, he's a friend, he won't do something like that. Well, voila, they do something like that. So it's very dangerous to assume something like that would never happen, because it can happen, and the past has shown that it will happen.
yeah. I mean, I guess if you look at something like the Nazi era, the 1930s, that I guess ordinary Germans were being brainwashed by Nazi propaganda. Although having said that, I don't think most of the German army really knew exactly what was going on there.
No, but it's not per se the Nazi propaganda in Germany, but you see a betrayal of your neighbors in the occupied countries like the Netherlands, where I live too. Because I know personal stories from family members that were of things that happened in the area where I live, which ended up people being sent to Germany. So it happens. And your people who you known for years, and you see that in all kinds. Well, perhaps a more recent conflict, really recent, 20 years ago, I think it is now, the Hutsi and the Tutsis in Africa. The same thing. Two groups that basically thought the same, had a different background, but for no apparent reason they started killing each other.
I thought the Tutsis and the Hutu hated each other. I mean, not the Tutsis. I mean, the Hutu hated the Tutsis, so it was sort of like it was a genocide basically there. It was an ideological.
Yes, but you see a person of community A living next to a person of community B, and knowing them for years, always laughing, standing next to each other in the bar, drinking with each other, and then as suddenly such a conflict occurs, and they start killing each other. And you saw that in Yugoslavia, for example, too, and that perhaps was more pillars towards religious difference than in the Hutsi and Tutsis. I'm not entirely I'm not entirely sure what the exact conflict between the Hutsis and the Tutsis was, other than that they were different tribes. But in Yugoslavia, you saw clearly the distinction between a more Christian, Orthodox, I think they were all Roman Catholics mostly, the Serbs, and then the Muslim community. There also you had communities where the two of these communities lived in the same village for years and years and years, and the only stabilizing factor they had back then was basically communism. What was his name? I forget his name. When you go there, you see his name in big letters all over the hills back in the early 90s. Uh, anyway, but then the conflict happens and they start killing each other, and your own neighbors are very capable of doing such a thing. So when you pass laws um, uh, that favors a certain community in your country and ostracizes another community, then you are making a canyon between the two. And when a conflict happens, I think such a canyon collapses in chaos. So
Well, I'd say, I guess I'll have to concede it then because mm, I guess you're right. It seems horrifyingly easy that this sort of thing could happen. I mean, I guess it's a slightly relevant point, but have you two heard about I'm sure you have, the Alps plane crash, the one that happened a few days ago?
yes, of course, yeah.
Now, of course, that was a situation where a promising co-pilot, and his record, I suppose, is his personality. I mean, there was no strong evidence that, he was going to do anything like that, although people are now thinking that it was something to do with depression or something along those lines, and it was a sort of suicide murder. But it was something that was still entirely unexpected, and not something that you'd expect someone, I mean, even a suicidal person to necessarily do.
Yeah, because it's very strange. I think an ex-girlfriend, I'm not sure when she was his girlfriend, but an ex-girlfriend of his said that he once told her that one day I'll be famous. So, uh, so perhaps that played a part in his mind. Perhaps he had a narcissistic nature. I don't know. But then you also have what has dripped out into the news over the last few days, that he had mental issues, but also that he had medical issues, that his eyes were going bad. Well, we won't know for sure until everything is investigated, and it's only been a few days ago, so it's very difficult to speculate. But I think, yeah, it all plays a part. But how can you prevent something like that? Even with the two-man rule in the cockpit, like they have in the United States of America, where it is obligated that there are always two people in the cockpit. Now, well, suppose the pilot goes to the bathroom, like what happened a few days ago, and a stewardess of mere 40-50 kilos is the second person in the cockpit. What is a small tiny stewardess of 50 kilo going to do against a pilot planning to crash the aircraft into the ground, and suppose the guy weighs 100 kilos, 120 kilos. So a tiny stewardess is not going to do anything against.
I wasn't aware that there was a stewardess in the cockpit with the co-pilot.
No. What I said, it is in the United States, according to the rules, it is obligated to have two persons in the cockpit all the time. And suppose the pilot goes to the toilet, then a stewardess or a steward has to come into the cockpit, so there are still two people in the cockpit. Because a pilot has to go to the bathroom at some point in time. But in this case, that didn't happen. There wasn't a second person in the cockpit because he closed the door and he kept the door locked. So there was no second person in this case in the cockpit. But what I said, what is a tiny stewardess going to do as a mind experiment? Suppose there was a tiny stewardess in the cockpit or a steward. What is he or she going to do against a pilot who knows how to fly the plane and wants to crash it?
I mean, it certainly would reduce the odds, though, because I mean, I mean, in this case, the co-pilot locked the door, and I mean the door. I guess it takes several steps to do that because it wasn't something that could be immediately opened using the keypad. So you would have to lock the door, and without anyone else noticing. So if you had someone else in the co-pilot with them, and they attempted to do that, even if they were overpowered by the co-pilot, they would probably call out. I mean, of course, I mean. It's still obviously possible that the plane could be hijacked by someone like a co-pilot, but it just makes it less likely that something like that would happen. Although, in terms of America having a policy where you have two people in the cockpit, that's probably because after the 9/11 thing, you had given them to understand that in America you had to have a lock on the door to prevent terrorist attacks like 9/11 from happening. So I suspect that they maybe thought some of these eventualities through. What happens if it's the co-pilot or the pilot that's actually the hijacker, and how can we make this less likely? And I guess they thought the situation through a little bit more. But in this case, I mean, I don't think there was an awful lot that could have ever been done. I mean, sometimes I think you just have to say that the chance of this happening is extremely low, and it just might not be possible to prevent this sort of thing from happening. We just might have to accept that there's a very small chance that something like this could happen every time that we fly.
Yeah. I saw it demonstrated on TV how the door is being locked and how it could be kept locked. There's a keypad outside the door, like you said. So the pilot has an override key or 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's a possibility how we could still enter the cockpit. But in case somebody presses in that code and it has bad intentions, the person inside the cockpit still has an option to override the override. So the pilot pushes the code in with an attempt to enter the door, and the co-pilot has to keep the key that prevents the door from opening, has to keep the button down. And in this case, that's probably what happened. The pilot pressed in the code and the co-pilot kept the door locked. Yeah, and how are you going to prevent something like that? Yeah, I don't know. When somebody wants to kill himself and also want to make himself famous, yeah, where there's a will, there is a way. I guess. So.
I mean, if we just think about the motivations here, I mean, I don't think this was a terrorist attack. There's no signifies that it was. I mean, there was no political statement being made. The plane was not crashed into a residential area. It was crashed into a mountain. I mean, that says. I mean, that fact in itself tells me that it's probably not a terrorist attack.
No. It is very particular that he crashed in the area he knew himself very well, because he did fly glider planes too, and he crashed in the area where he also used to play on with his glider plane. And one potential theory, but that's an assumption of mine, and it's very early because they're still investigated, is perhaps because they also found medical papers which said that his eyesight was getting worse. So that may have been a trigger, because that would prevent him in the future perhaps of staying as a pilot with would prevent him from staying a pilot. So perhaps that triggered something mentally in his head, which made him decide to do something like that. I don't know.
You can still be a pilot, though. I mean, I guess he would have had to have something like laser eye surgery, but
Yeah, but the question why? Why? That's the question. Why would somebody who is attempt on taking his own life, why would a person like that decide to take 150, 149 other people with him to death? I don't get it.
I mean, it's possible that he just thought. I mean, uh, it could be the case that he really did not care at this point. He was so far down. He was so far on the road. He just simply did not care, and that he probably thought that it was just the easiest way to do it. Or perhaps he even thought that, like you say, crashing into a place that he knew well, perhaps, in a sort of very sick way, he saw some sort of poetry in it. I don't know, but I mean, uh, I guess as methods of suicide go, I mean, pressing a button on a plane, you know, I guess you probably find it. I don't know. You might find it easier than trying to stab yourself or hang yourself or something like that. But taking 100 other people's lives as well, you'd have to be so far down that you just simply did not care. You'd have to be completely amoral to do something like that. Completely. So,
Maybe he had like a death fetish and he wanted to die in a plane crash.
Yeah, but this particularly this must be something that has played in his mind a very long time, because what his girlfriend said, that he said a few years ago, that one day I'll be famous. Well, now he is, well, not famous, now he's infamous. But yeah, I don't know. He wanted to be famous. Yeah, marry a Kardashian, I'd say.
could that just be a coincidence though? Because don't most people say that they want to be famous when they're fairly young? I mean, isn't that something that most people? I mean, okay, maybe not when they're adults, but when they're young teenagers, most people actually do say that they want to be famous. So, I mean, I don't think that's a particularly uncommon thing to want to say, is it really? I mean, is it possible that they're reading too much?
It depends how they say it and what they say. If it's sort of a spiteful thing, then yeah, it's of concern. If it's just
One day I'll be famous.
yeah, it's like the villain in the over-the-top villain who says something like, fools, I'll show them all, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, I think it depends how they say it that really matters.
Yeah, the context. Yeah.
I don't suppose we do have the context either. I mean, I've noticed that little details have been coming through. There was something also about him having a sick note that he screwed up, and
Yeah, because he had both medical papers and the papers from some psychiatry intent. He let himself investigate, I think. And I'm not sure what the papers said exactly, but he tore them up. So that clearly shows emotional distress in some way, I suppose. So there was something in his head, yeah. And I think the investigation, I hope we'll get a report in a few weeks that explains it clearly, because if that report we will be getting is unable to explain it clearly, then yeah, then every pilot will be looking towards his co-pilot, and every co-pilot will be watching to his pilot in the future.
Yeah, but this isn't the first time that this probably happened.
No, no. There was because of this there were I think it was on CNN, they told about a few cases in which similar things happened, and somewhere in Indonesia or Thailand there was also a pilot who took about 70 or 80 people with him into death by crashing into the sea, and he also had personal problems.
And it's also suspected that the Egypt Air one, I think in 1999, was possibly also a suicide. Nobody really knows on that one, but it was long suspected that it was. So I would say this is definitely most likely not unique in that respect. I mean, the thing is, it's just so incredibly rare. I mean, think about how many planes fly every year, and decades pass between each incident. It's you know, I'm not sure how people could really stop it from happening ever again. I just would think that it's exceedingly rare, even if we can't.
Yeah, but they still say that compared to other modes of transportations like driving a car, it is still the safest way to travel.
Yeah.
But it's a spectacular way to die, so it always makes the news.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, plummeting to your death is, it's not exactly the same as getting hit by a truck on the highway. That's
the roller
pretty
coaster
much
effect.
instant. I mean, crashing into the mountain is instant, but you've got a few minutes before that to contemplate what's about to happen to you. It's a horrific thing, you know.
Yeah, I had a friend that walked before a truck on the highway about 12 years back now,
Mm-hmm.
and he was mentally distressed too, and an addict, and nobody knew. And he one day got into his car at night and passed a truck on the highway. And about a kilometer ahead of the truck, the truck driver saw him go to the side of the road and with a smile walked in front of the truck and dead.
Yeah.
Those are things you don't hear often in the news because those only tend to be small articles in newspapers
Mm-hmm.
compared to an airplane crash.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what happened was really horrible, but I'm not sure exactly how we could stop it from happening again. You know, somebody really, if a pilot really wants to crash a plane, there's very little you can do to stop him. It's just that, you know, I mean, if a school bus driver wants to crash a school bus, there's, you know, what are you going to do to prevent that? It's a horrible thing, but you have to be realistic. It could happen at any point in time. We all rely on people around us to make the right decisions. You know, if everybody acted, it's fortunate very few people act this way all the time. But we all rely on people not to be mass murderers around us every day, or we would all be dead. You know. So yeah.
I mean, is it odd that someone who is so innocuous would turn out to be a mass murderer, or is that something fairly common that mass murderers actually do tend to be? I mean, there was always the saying that it's the quiet ones that you have to watch.
Yeah.
Is there any truth in that?
It probably is some truth to that, quite frankly. Although, no, because, you know, it really puts a lot of like quiet people who've done nothing wrong into a very bad situation of being like suspected for all sorts of things when they've literally done nothing wrong. So I don't know. I would feel bad about categorizing everybody like that, I suppose.
Well, I can relate to that because most people will say I'm an extremely quiet person, and I have seen I've seen things on the TV where they describe a homicidal maniac, and they say, well, he was such a quiet guy, and he was such a nice guy, and everybody liked him, and he did this and that, and here I'm going and looking at and thinking they're basically talking about me, but I would never do something like that. So.
Now you make me suspect you of all sorts of things there.
No, yeah, because it's
of course the question that I feel guilty to ask, but I feel like I want to ask it is that how do you know that you're not going to do it? I mean, let's say there's a really traumatic event that happens, that you become horribly depressed or something like that. How do you know that your personality wouldn't change to the extent that something that you've never thought would be possible actually might be? I mean, is there a mass murder in everyone?
No, I actually think that's not true. I think that certain conditions have to be met. I'm not a psychologist, but you know, there are certain things that are anathema to me that I long ago decided that I would rather die than commit. If you know, the classic example is World War II. Somebody, you're in the German army. Somebody tells you to commit mass murder. Would you do it to survive? My answer would be no, even if it means my life. Or if you're in a nuclear silo and somebody tells you to turn the key. Well, first of all, I mean, I wouldn't put myself in the position of volunteering for such a job, but you know, I would not want to turn the key on a nuclear missile either. So, and I would frankly rather die than to actually commit the world to an all-out nuclear war.
Well,
You know.
well, I think uh, perhaps to a degree we all have it in us. It's scary. It's a scary thought, perhaps. But I recall what you just said about World War II. There was a documentary a few years back about a photo book that they found, which contained the photos of the
Yes, I
last few days of
Yeah.
Buchenwald Auschwitz, and
Yeah.
and they depict both the pictures of the Jews and all the other people that arrived at Auschwitz, but they also depicted the happy scenes of the officers later.
Yeah, with their families, etc. I remember that actually. Yeah.
And then that's it's such an odd duality that in, on the one side they are basically loving family fathers, dads, and mothers in some cases too, because there also were women there, of course. And on the other side, you got these horrible monsters that send millions of people to their death. And how can a person like that live with himself? Well, one answer the Nazis used was a lot of alcohol. It seemed because they yeah, they drank a lot of alcohol there, but that's only not that's a temporary fix, I think.
Yeah, it was brainwashing. These people. I mean, it's an unfair comparison for me to say that because, you know, I am not such a person. I did not live in that time in that person's shoes. I did not have their life, and I was not exposed to that sort of thinking and propaganda. So I really can't compare. But as myself today, here and now, I would not commit such acts. So I think that there's a bit of I think there's a bit of wide-eyed speculation when people say, well, it's in all of us. I don't think it is. I think that to do certain things, you have to have certain, as I said, certain conditions have to be met. And in the case of, you know, mass murder, etc., I think those conditions have to be quite extreme. I don't think that most of us live lives that are that extreme in our thinking and in our experiences. And you know, even most people who do go through these horrible situations in war, etc., do not come out as mass murderers, nor would they be. They're horrified by it. So I think that it's a bit rich to say that we all are capable of doing it, because I think that we actually really aren't. These people are exceptional in the fact that all of these conditions are met, and then they act, and then they decide to act, because some people have all those conditions and decide still not to act. So I would say that this is what actually makes it such a rarity, you know.
Well, because in the case of the pilot, I think perhaps it is a narcissistic personality that you have to take a lot of people like that with you. And but in the case of the pilot, well, it did take 10 more minutes, of course, and he still had to think about what he was doing all the time. But I think the final act was very quick, I assume, because once a plane goes down with almost 1,000 kilometers per hour, it's a few seconds and boom, you're gone.
Well, no, but it still took a few minutes.
Yes, yes, yes. But in the case of Anders Breivik, I think how can a person like
Yeah.
that exist? I can't imagine I can't ever imagine myself being like that. I have a certain ideology too. Sometimes I am on the left, and sometimes I am on the right. But and I'm not a fan of religions. I'm not a fan of Muslims. I'm not a fan of Christians. I'm not a fan of Buddhists. I'm not a fan of the Jewish faith.
Mhm.
But I could never imagine myself picking up a weapon and shooting and killing all those people just for the sake that they are of a different worldview than my own personal view. But I will also recognize that I'm still a human being and never say never. You never know. Suppose something happens in the future and the world changes 100 degrees in a few years' time, and famine, war, you never know. Something could always happen that triggers something in you. I think that could perhaps make you do things you would never think now you would be capable of. So
I
I
mean,
think,
I think in the case of the pilot, though, I mean, I don't think he was murdering people out of malice. I think it was just this extreme level of apathy and amorality, where he was at the point where he was pushed so far that he just simply did not care at all about everything, his own life and everyone else's. He just simply didn't care. And I mean, I think that's a little bit different to people that want to kill people. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, he didn't care that other people died, but I think there's a subtle difference between not caring and wanting to go out and kill people. I mean, I don't think it. I don't. To be honest, it's not really any worse of a crime because at the end of the day, you're still murdering people. But I think the psychology is perhaps a little bit different.
Mhm.
I kind of actually got the impression from what I've seen thus far of the story that this person was somebody who was really excited about what they did for a living. I mean, it seemed that it wasn't only that he was a commercial pilot, but he also was a hobby pilot in gliders. And I do know from what you guys have said thus far that he had some medical conditions, both psychological and I guess with his eyes. That could have been. I mean, if I were just going to piece it together, I would imagine he gets the news from the doctor and knows that without his eyesight being at a certain level and without his mental health being at a certain stability, that he's not going to be able to fly a plane. And they send him essentially home with paperwork saying, I got to get these things straightened out before I can fly a plane again. So he knows that this next flight that he's scheduled to fly is probably the last opportunity he's going to get to fly a plane if there's no hope of him getting mentally better or having his eyesight improve. I can imagine he's somebody who's to some degree heartbroken that his dream or the things that he loved to do were basically going to be taken away from him through really no fault of his own. But at the same token, with nothing left to live for, what do? You get on board. You go to your favorite place where you like to fly. You feel bad maybe about what you have to do, considering there are people behind you that are innocent. But like you said, he's not really considering those people. They're to him innocent people along for the ride, and it's kind of like, sorry folks, you just happened to get on the wrong flight today. He crashed into a place like a mountain where he'd like to fly. He didn't crash into a place that was a populated area. He didn't want to take more lives than he did. It was only that he took the lives that he necessarily had to take because they were the only way he was going to get on that flight as well. Like if he refused to take the people, there was no way he was going to fly. And with the psychological reports and vision reports pending, I mean, I can just assume that his flight time was going to be limited pretty quickly based on those reports.
yeah, but
And
still,
it would be his last opportunity.
Yeah, but still, you would have the question: why take those 194 people with him? If I can only imagine that it is because he once said to his girlfriend that one day he would be famous. He could also have taken a glider, fly over those mountains, unsnap the belt, and plummet down.
Actually, that's a pretty good point because if we try and get inside his head and say, well, I'm living in a plane, so I'm going to die by it, that sort of thing. I live for it, so I'm going to die by it. And yes, why didn't he just take up a glider and commit suicide on his own? I mean,
Well,
would that have been a possibility? Could he have done that? I mean, I'm sure he could have done, couldn't he?
I think if it were me, I would suspect that knowing that he had some medical reports that were likely going to ground him, he saw this as maybe his last opportunity to get into the air, because once that paperwork gets filed, and I'm not sure the way it works, in commercial aviation versus if you want to just go down to your local flight school and rent a glider or whatever for an afternoon, but you can imagine somebody being given this news, going home, having a tough night, ripping up the paperwork, saying, screw it, I got to work tomorrow, getting on the plane and saying, this could be my last opportunity. What if I never get another opportunity to go, to be in the air again? And, it sucks that I got to take 150 people with me, but I don't care enough about my own life because what matters to me is flying. So why the hell should I give a shit about the people behind me? And it's pretty sick. It's absolutely sick. Don't get me wrong. But if you're looking at this is your last opportunity to fly versus this is one of the ways you can do it, it puts a little more stress on somebody to take a larger risk or to take to have that sort of outcome. And then if there's something to the fame thing too, then then there's something to that, and I guess we'll find out later. But I just imagine it's a case where the medical reports are going to get to the boss within 48 hours, and you have one flight on your schedule in the next 24 hours, and you make a snap decision that ends the way it ends. I mean, it seems to me more tragic than it is. I mean, it's malicious, yeah, but to me, it seems like a really sad case where a person thought they had no other way out and then chose that way out.
Mhm.
It doesn't seem to me a case of, to hell with these 150 people, I'm going out to be famous. You know what I mean? It seemed more sad than.
Well, I mean, the note about wanting to be famous, was that left before he had any idea his eyesight was deteriorating?
My understanding was that was just a comment made by an ex-girlfriend that
Yeah.
he had said he wanted to be famous. So I mean, that could be just a thing.
It could
Maybe he
be
did want to be
a false memory or something. I mean, I guess when your boyfriend is a murderer, you probably remember things that I don't know.
Well,
It could be also. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think they'll eventually investigate it. A lot of things that we're saying now, of course, are assumptions. So it could exactly be like you said, that it's pure impulse. Because you also have to note the fact that there was no suicide note. It was a short flight over Europe. So it could be that the moment the pilot said, "I'm going to the toilet," that something snapped in his head, and that he thought to himself, this is the moment. Now I can do it. That's
I mean, how long was the pilot gone for? I mean, surely to actually have to make that decision and I mean, the door was quite difficult to lock, wasn't it? I understand that it took multiple stages to do that, and it's.
I think maybe the thing we're overlooking is that when you're going to work, if your job as a pilot, I think we think that they're much more rigorous than they are a lot of times. These guys get to know one another, they fly together, and it's kind of like, hey, I'll be back in a minute, I gotta go stretch my legs and take a piss. And they walk out, and then they could be, they walk from the the front of the plane to the back of the plane, they take a leak, they say to a stewardess, they check on a couple of first-class passengers. Hi, how's your flight? Oh, great, glad to have you aboard. That's plenty of time to do whatever you need to do in the cockpit. I mean, it would seem to me, if your goal is to stop a terrorist from getting in, then you'd want to have that procedure go pretty quick if you're suddenly finding yourself under siege in the cockpit, right? I mean, multiple stages, yeah, but it should be fast and simple for the person trained to do it.
Okay, I mean, does anyone think there's any possibility at all that it wasn't murder? I mean, it looks pretty bad. Is there any situation where it could have been not murder? Maybe, I don't know.
No, because they got the sound tape, so it was pretty clear that the pilot tried to get in and he didn't let him in, because he has to forcibly keep the key in a certain position to keep the door locked. That's what
Really? So is that true then? So you have to be holding something in order to do that.
Well, that's what I understood. There are three ways, if I recall what I saw in the CNN explained, is somebody leaves the cockpit, and there are three ways to get in. One way is that the person inside the cockpit clicks the position open, and the door opens. Another way is the override key via the keypad on the outside, so the person that is not in the cockpit can press an override key in the case something has happened inside the cockpit. And then he can come in. But if there is still somebody in the cockpit that knows that the override code is compromised, then that person still has an option to keep the door closed by holding the button in a certain position. And that's how it was explained to me, at least on CNN. So that means that the pilot pressed the override code to get in, because he was stamping at the door van let me in German probably. But the co-pilot kept the button in the keep lockdown code, so the override code did not work. So it was clearly murder in that case, if that is how it exactly works.
That seems a pretty safe bet then. So, just out of interest, what would happen if both the pilot and the co-pilot had a heart attack or something? I mean, it seems pretty unlikely, but...
Well, I suppose a stewardess has the override key too.
I mean, she wouldn't be able to fly the plane though.
No,
I mean,
no.
Because when I first saw this on the news, I thought something along those lines had happened. Just given the fact that the plane was descending slowly and it crashed into a mountain.
Well, I know.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think a lot of modern aircraft now are so computerized that there's almost really nothing that the pilot has to do. They essentially just do the takeoff and the landing, and even in optimum conditions, those two things can be taken care of by the flight computers, as long as things are set up properly. So it is possible that if there was, I mean, it would have to be pretty crazy of a situation where both pilots go down. But I guess it would be possible if a stewardess or a person on the plane had access to ground control, at least through a radio, that they could be talked through what to do with the computer. I mean, essentially, it's like tech support, like, hi, welcome to, Delta tech support. What can I do for you?
That's definitely happened before in a couple of emergency situations where actual passengers have landed planes.
Yeah, it's so, like the fly-by-wire systems are really, really advanced now, and so unless you're in a storm and a lot of the equipment is down, pretty easy. Well, I wouldn't say pretty easy, but I mean, hey, if you can get on the ground, you're 35,000 feet up, and somebody's telling you how to get to the ground, I would listen. And if it got me there, I'd kiss the ground. But the fact that can even happen nowadays is that's amazing.
There are situations where passengers have actually landed planes.
Yes.
I don't know about major commercial, like 300 passenger planes, but I definitely know about smaller planes that were like single, like Cessna, like smaller, like 40 or 50 like pond jumper planes, where like a single pilot has been like out of commission for some reason. And yeah, I've heard of stories where I'd have to like follow up on that and confirm, but I've heard about stories about that. Just like seeing news articles here and there.
Well, they actually build those systems with that in mind for emergencies. So yeah, it's not unknown, and they do actually create those computers with that possibility. So I mean, it's not easy, but yeah, it's absolutely doable in today's modern aircraft.
It's, you know, what struck me as going back to this German pilot. What struck me as funny is that we have technology to make the plane essentially take off and land and do all the maneuvering that it needs to do in bad weather to make the ride as smooth as possible, and yet there was no
override.
technology to say, oh shit, we're heading towards the mountain. We have to stop this asshole. You know what I mean? Like
No, because the pilot can override anything the computer wants to do. So if a passenger has to fly the plane down to the ground, that's possible because he's just doing what the computer is telling him to do and what the tower is telling him to do. But a pilot can override anything on the computer. They can override warning signals. They can override anything that's dangerous to do, etc. Because there are situations in which case you might need to do a fuel dump or something like that, which a normal passenger wouldn't have to do. So you know, the computer could be screaming holy hell, but the pilot's just going to keep, you know, going towards his destination. There's nothing a computer can do to override that, you know.
Well, I know there have been times when computers and pilots have been, you know, kind of not on the same page, and the computer will try to do an override of what the pilot's doing, and because of miscommunication between the two, they end up stalling the plane, and the plane crashes, turning out basically that the software and the pilot just, they weren't really in sync. So, I mean, I guess it's possible to take a perfectly good working airplane with bad software and crash it. It just makes me think that it would be nice if there were a feature that kind of, you know, oh, well, the plane knows everything's going on, everything's going smoothly, and suddenly, you know, the door lock thing has gone off twice, and now we're hitting towards the ground. Maybe something now is not right. You know, like if you could program in the computer to understand something simple like somebody's monkeying with the door, and now the plane's heading towards this mountain. I think we should stop this and just go back to the original flight plan until it gets sorted out. And, you know, I guess worst case scenario is it doesn't get sorted out and you run out of fuel and you hit the hill anyway, but something extra. And
Yeah,
I
but
wouldn't be surprised if it came out that way.
well, here's the thing. I don't see. I'm not a pilot, but I have played one on TV. No, I'm not a pilot, but I can imagine. I mean, I know pilots, and I can imagine that very few of them would actually want to fly a plane where a computer can override every command, or even some commands. It's just they are not the kind of people that want the computers taking over. It's just, I think it's anathema to them in every single respect.
Oh, I can totally understand that. I mean, it's the same thing with the car that can drive itself. I mean, it takes an awful lot of trust in a machine to take your hand off that wheel. I mean, we've all done it, right? Take your hands off the wheel and see how long you can tolerate it. Then you start to drift and you go, oh shit, and then you got to put your hands back. There would be times when software, the computer, would be doing something that it thought was logical that you realize was not logical, and you would have that steering wheel there to change course. But certainly there would be the reverse situation from time to time where somebody was trying to do something malicious, and being able to teach a computer or to have certain parameters set so that it would buy itself essentially more time in the air. You know what I mean? In this particular case, it would be great to have maybe a less emotional sentience in the cockpit.
Well, you ever watch the movie The Right Stuff or read the book?
I can't remember if I have or not.
Okay, well, fantastic movie, even better book. But that was actually a point of contention during the Mercury program. The scientists who were making the rockets wanted originally to put the pilot in, the astronaut, without any control. Okay, and the movie basically hypes it up, but it wasn't really like that. But the idea was that, you know, the pilot would just be there as a passenger originally, and the pilots kind of rebelled. They were all test pilots, so, you know, they were all hot rods, etc., and they rebelled against that very notion. So they ended up deferring to the pilots and giving pilots full control. These are the kinds of people you're talking about when you're talking about a lot of airplane pilots, and they're not going to want to give up control to a computer. The computer is fine for them to give suggestions, to give advice, to plot routes, and even have it on autopilot, etc. But the pilot will want ultimate control. I don't think that's ever going to change. I don't think we're ever really going to be able to find pilots who are going to say, well, I'm going to pilot this plane and have very little control over it.
I also think it's a very bad idea for another reason, because suppose something would happen with such a sophisticated flight computer, you would want experienced pilots that know how to fly a plane.
Right. You know, it's not the same as a car on the ground. I mean, a car is bad enough, but a plane, forget about it. You know, if the computer goes bust and you can't override that thing, forget it. You're toast, and every pilot knows that. So I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, I'm not. I don't want to suggest that that's what I'm. I don't want to say that I want the computer, or I would never dream of a time when the computer had full control all the time. But rather, in those situations where certain parameters are set, i.e., the door has suddenly been locked, checked, and then somebody's tried to re-enter the cockpit. Has been basically told, no, you can't go back into the, you can't come back into the cockpit. The computer, knowing that these types of things are going on, should have basically almost like a self-warning system saying something's not right. There's an argument between people who are inside versus outside the cockpit, and then keeping with what the flight plan is, whatever the autopilot's doing at the time. Okay, we're heading towards Spain or wherever we're going. Let's just keep doing what we've been doing up to the point where all this stuff went haywire in the cockpit. Forget about the people for a second, and then, when things calm down and when the parameters are set such that either the cockpit door situation is resolved or what have you, then we'll relinquish control back to the pilot. And that way you could avoid a situation where the co-pilot is forcing the plane down and at the same token keeping people out. The computer would essentially recognize this as a dangerous situation where there's no reason at all where somebody should be aiming a plane downward while holding the pilot at bay. This is a dangerous situation, and the plane should know that, just as it knows in bad weather to speed up and to slow down based on the wind direction and turbulence. It already knows how to do that better.
No, because a computer cannot figure out the situation. Now, okay, so here we're playing armchair generals, because this is essentially what happened after 9/11. This is why the pilot couldn't open the door, because of what happened 9/11. So essentially, they tried to come up with all sorts of reasons why a door should be opened, should be able to be opened from the outside, and they saw the utility of having a door locked at all times, being basically impenetrable. You can shoot it, you can try to blow it up with a local charge that actually wouldn't bust the plane if you blew it up, and it still won't open. There are situations, however, where a pilot might have to crash the plane. You don't know. Remember, these people sit there and think about these situations all the time. That's what they do. So imagine, that they discover there's a nuclear bomb on the plane and it's heading towards Washington, D.C., and the pilot decides, I'm going to have to crash this plane because if not, millions of people are going to die. They think about that sort of thing. Okay, and if they're thinking about it, their contention is, yes, the pilot would have to crash the plane. Okay, he would have to sacrifice those 150 or 300 lives even to save millions of people, and that's an acceptable loss given the alternative. So these sorts of situations where a pilot has to make the decisions, they're not going to want to give up that control, not only the pilots, but the people who are actually building these security systems inside. The only thing it doesn't take into account is the pilot going crazy. But again, there's very little you can do. I mean, the pilot, let's say you make a computer system that the pilot can't override, and then his buddy goes to the bathroom, you lock the door, and the pilot just, rips out the guts of the computer. The plane's going to crash anyway. It's just going to crash. If you have access to the cockpit and you know what you're doing, you have control, and there's almost nothing that we can do to prevent like human insanity to come into the equation.
Why is it that the only two options though? Why is it either the pilot's on site or in control or a computer's in control? Why can't somebody just remotely be in control? Why can't the pilot who got locked out hit some kind of emergency button that lets somebody at the FAA know what's going on, or whoever's in charge of that knows something's bad, and then they take remote control over the plane?
I'll give you one example. Cost, first of all, there's a definite cost to all these systems that is really huge. By the way, we don't even appreciate it, but it is absolutely huge. If you're going to make a plane that's tens of millions of dollars, or well, even more, $100 million above the price tag of what it is today. Imagine what airplane tickets are going to cost in the future, and imagine how fewer people are going to fly. Airplane companies are already not doing so great because of the competition is cutthroat. It's insane. So that's one thing. You do have like El Al planes, for example, actually do have military flares because people have tried to hit them with ground-to-air missiles before. But these are not subsidized by the airplane company; they're subsidized by the actual state of Israel. So it's a regular company in America would not be able to put this sort of system on a plane because it would just cost too damn much. All right, these are very, very sophisticated systems we're talking about. Yeah, you could put some sort of drone technology on it, but again, if a pilot has access to the cockpit, he just rips out the computer, he busts it up, he takes a fire extinguisher and smashes it to bits. Boom, no more computer, no more problem for him, the plane's going to crash. That's again, you cannot, the guy who's in charge of the system can screw the system up. The guy who has access to the machine can screw the machine up. You cannot prevent against that. You can try all sorts of things to mitigate that from happening, from being likely to happen, but in the end, you're really going to have to rely on people. As I said, we rely on people every day around us. I mean, how do you know when you're standing at a busy intersection, how do you know that the guy behind you isn't a psychopath and isn't just going to push you right into the middle of the street, killing you instantly? Okay, it's actually happened before, but it is so rare that it's a non sequitur in these in criminal investigations, criminal statistics, but it can happen. So it's the same situation here. You have to put your faith in the faith. There I go. I said it. Now you have to put your trust in the pilot not to do that sort of thing. When you send your kid off to school on the bus, you have to trust that the bus driver isn't going to go completely psycho and just drive it into an oncoming truck or off a cliff or something. There's very little that you can do when it comes to the people who are in charge. You have to actually trust them with your lives. That's just how it goes.
Right, but the thing is, with a car, you trust every driver on the road, but you buckle your seatbelt and you're happy that you have airbags and the technologies that for a long time companies said were not affordable. It wouldn't be useful to have side impact airbags on a vehicle because they were just too damn expensive, and the likelihood of the crash and the fatalities or injuries were minimal. But then folks started buying the cars that had those features, and
right,
lo and behold, everybody had to have it, right? So it was just one more fail-safe that was told, that was implemented as a result of people wanting to be safer than they already were.
I absolutely agree. But the problem with your example is, once again, if you're a passenger in that car and you have your seatbelt on and there are airbags and there are anti-lock brakes, if the guy sitting next to you wants to crash that car, none of these things are going to prevent him from doing so. Okay?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, and I would say that if we're going to look at computer technology versus human error / human desire to make a decision like that, you would have to have a technology or a computer that was smart enough to rapidly respond to incoming data to say, okay, well, we should not be making this maneuver. The car should not be making a 90-degree turn at 75 miles an hour. Are there times when it should? Yes. Are there a lot of times when it should? Probably not. And so, you have different traction systems to lock certain wheels and to free certain wheels so that the car becomes more stable even when the driver makes a mistake. It could be a driver making a mistake, or it could be a driver intentionally doing something wrong, and the computer doesn't necessarily know, but it should do what's in its quote, best interest, I guess, considering that there are passengers, right? You're not gonna, like you said, you're not gonna cover every single situation. If somebody wants to wreck a car, they can wreck a car. If somebody wants to take me out and them out while I'm the passenger, I guess it's possible to happen. But I'm still gonna buckle my seatbelt. I'm still gonna be happy to sit where there are airbags.
There is a real problem with this, though, and I have to admit I do agree with Nathaniel in this case, that if you have a system this complicated, surely a really complicated system has a chance of going wrong as well. I mean, computers aren't perfect. I'm not talking about things like errors or viruses, but perhaps the computer thinks it's doing the right thing, but in this niche situation, it ends up doing the wrong thing. With a really complicated system, you're probably going to get unforeseen bugs that will cause the computer to actually kill you. I mean, probably the better way of doing it would be to simply cut out the middleman and just have the computer. But I mean, I guess that would probably be a lot safer than having a pilot in the first place, to just have a computer. Although that's not.
I think we're at that point now, and we're in that middle space now, where it used to be that you had 100% trust in the pilot because the pilot was the one who had all control over everything in the plane. His feet were attached to pedals that were attached to wires that controlled levers that moved the plane's wings and tail, and he had control over the throttle and all these things. Now most modern, at least with the big airlines, commercial airplanes are fly-by-wire, which means it's all done with computers. The pilot essentially enters in parameters just like they would, like the throttle. Instead of the throttle being just connected to, a port which allows more fuel to enter the engine, it's now connected to a computer which determines how much fuel to dump at that point. It lets the pilot dump as much fuel into the engine as it does. It's allowing the pilot to do these things, but it has to go through the computer first. There's a possibility, of course, that the pilot screws up or that the computer screws up. And yeah, well, anyway, back to what I was saying. I think we are in that middle ground, and now the argument is whether or not to have the pilot have the last word or to have the computer have the last word, or as Rethink was suggesting, to have some other person outside of the airplane have the last word.
Well, remember, again, this all happened because of 9/11. And remember what happened 9/11. Remember, there was a flight that actually the passengers fought and they crashed the plane instead of it going into the Capitol building. They knew where it was going. Apparently, they made a decision to sacrifice themselves, and these things are all taken into account. I mean, you have people sitting there literally all day long imagining worst case scenarios and what would the least worst outcome be, and what I mean, these sorts of things basically all rely on the fact that a human still has to have control. Because computers are hackable, they can make the wrong decision given that they don't understand the circumstances, etc. So I don't think that this is going to change in the near future, and I don't think that those people making the airplanes or even approving them on a security level, because the airplanes have to be approved, I don't think that they're going to want to see complete non-human control take over, just because of these possible situations.
I don't see why that. It's not even that the rare one-off possible explanation situations are what's driving that kind of advancement. I think when you look at something like a car, I don't see why it's so incredulous to think that the same technology, which as the other gentleman described, is being increasingly removed from human control. I don't see why it's such an incredulous leap to say eventually we'll have no human control at all. I don't see why
Right,
it's
right. But
far
again,
off.
a car is different. A car doesn't have nearly as many people,
I'm saying
at
all
risk.
transportation, buses, trains, cars, planes. I don't see why it's such. I think some might advance quicker than others in terms of removing human error from it, but the obvious direction of where it's going in terms of driver assistance, parking assistance, and then eventually full on the highway assistance and just complete autonomous control by a computer. I don't see why that's such an incredulous leap to see that. I think in our lifetimes, I think we'll definitely see that.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just in our case, the computer systems are not that sophisticated enough. Perhaps in 10, 20, 30, or 40 years, it will happen.
Well, again, I'm a big supporter of like the Google car, et cetera. I think these are the way of the future. But when you're talking about mass transportation in the air, the equation is completely different, especially given the track record of terrorism and what people could possibly want to do and what the solutions are when you're literally up there, at 30,000 feet. What's the best case scenario in terms of the outcome. So I just,
Well,
maybe I lived in Washington, D.C. too long, and I know too many people who spent their lives
no, because it's
doing
just
this,
it is just because you live in it now and you know computers from the past and you can compare them to now. But people that are being born now that will live in a world much more computerized, and they will have a totally different view and a totally different perspective on what computers are and what computers can do for us. So in a few decades time, I think it's feasible from the perspective those people have and their experience with computers at that time, that they will make a decision to let a computer take over totally control of an airplane.
Exactly. Just look at how the attitudes have changed towards like technology in general. Just cloud services were met with extreme skepticism.
No, I understand that. I mean, I'm part of that wave. But what
Yeah.
I'm saying is that a computer would have to have artificial intelligence to
Exactly.
understand this.
Yeah, I
This
would,
sort
I
of
would agree.
situation.
And I'm not saying it's there now. I'm just saying that if the market incentivizes it and if it becomes more profitable rather than to pay a pilot 50 grand a year, if it becomes more profitable just to just have a one-time or licensing payment for this software, if it's developed to the point where it's feasible, I don't see why a plane wouldn't adopt it. As
No,
you said, they're
because
cutting costs. They don't even serve me peanuts anymore.
No, because the pilot is that 50,000 a year. Well, it's actually more in a lot of cases, but it is insurance. Even if you have a computer that can fly the plane completely, which you basically do nowadays, that pilot is insurance that if something goes wrong, somebody can make a better decision than the computer. Now, I'm not saying that
He's also a
computers won't
liability.
right, but again, let's say you take out the pilot, right? Let's say you put a computer behind a steel door, okay? Does that make this plane really that much safer? We know that people can crash airplanes, can blow them up in the sky, can rupture the side, what have you. That's not actually going to make it all that much safer. Okay, what we're talking about is making flying safer, but will that actually make that much of a difference? If somebody wants to take a plane down, it's highly probable that if they're intelligent enough, they'll find a way. If they're not the pilot and they're a passenger, they will find a way. Okay.
As long as we do not allow artificial intelligence to have a religion, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. I agree.
Well,
again,
can I butt in real quick?
yeah, go ahead.
I think if we look at, maybe if we take a historical look at how planes have been taken down by humans from maybe recent recent past forward to now, it seems like the people who've tried to do it have had to get more technologically advanced as technology is advanced for the people making planes. At first, all you had to do was check a bag, and as long as the bag had a bomb and the bomb was timed to go off, then you were all set. You can check your bag, you walk away, you walk out of the airport, your bag goes on the plane, boom, plane down. Then they figured out, well, why don't we make anybody who checks a bag has to get on the plane with the bag. That would disincentivize people to do these things, because then they'd have to take themselves out as well. And there were times when people just took checked a bag with a bomb and themselves and blew themselves and the plane up. And they've tried to do that in a number of different ways since 9/11 and before 9/11. It's been attempted. Then people got more sophisticated and found out that you didn't need the bomb, you didn't need a gun. All you needed was a box cutter and somebody smart enough to fly the plane in the direction it needed to go. Mm-hmm. So then 9/11 happens, and some more attempts similar to that where people tried to storm cockpits, and we decided, well, we're going to lock the cockpit. After large arguments about whether or not to arm people on planes and the rest of it, I think we kind of came to the idea that the best thing to do is to lock the cockpit. And like you said, Nathaniel, they've run through 1,000 or 1,000,000 scenarios of which way, what if the terrorist is on this side of the door? What if he's on that side of the door? What if he's on this side of the door with a pilot? What if he's on the other side of the door with a co-pilot or a co-conspirator or anything? But as every time we run into a situation where somebody has managed to break through and hack the system, so to speak, we've increased technology to a point to make it more difficult for them to do that. And I think we're starting to run out of physical barriers, and it seems the only thing left is the pilot, because now it seems in order to bring a plane down, you have to be able to get in the cockpit, fly the plane, and do a multiple number of tasks to keep the rest of the people on the plane from getting to you before you can even bring the thing down to where you want to bring it down to. I think eventually you get to a point where the plane itself as a weapon becomes useless because it's just too damn difficult. And so,
I know, first of all, I don't agree, because I don't think that if we have, for all our security, people will still be able to get bombs and explosives on a plane if they are determined. Because you have a human element, just as you do in the cockpit, and these things are not infallible. So it is not impossible for people to get guns or explosives on a plane still today. It's very difficult. But
sure, and I think the thing is to make it as difficult as possible and recognize the fact that there's going to be some people get through on accomplishing their mission, but to minimize. To make it such that the person considering it chooses chooses an alternative method is, I guess, the goal. If you think to yourself as a terrorist or whoever, there's these 1,000 steps that I'm going to have to go through in order to get me and my weaponry and everything on the plane, just to get on the plane, then I'm going to have to get in the cockpit, then I'm going to have to get control of the plane, then I'm going to have to get past, whatever other security there is in computer systems, just to make that thing into a weapon. It seems to me like you're just going to have to find other weaponry. And so
okay, but this is a different topic than what this guy did.
Sure, we've been all over the place on this.
Yeah, I agree. But to get back to, again, I think pilots would be outraged at the very idea that they should be taken completely out of the equation, and I'm not so sure again that it's really possible right now.
Not possible now, but I think the other thing to consider is that when you're taking pilots out of the cockpit, you don't have, at the end of the day, once there's no pilot seat in a plane, there's no pilot. There's nobody to really be mad. You just have to go find another job. There are just jobs that become obsolete when technology becomes advanced enough to make them obsolete. I can check out my groceries without having to talk to anybody if I want to. There's a number of things that are automated for me if I choose for them to be so. Piloting could be one of those things where the pilot just is no longer a position of employment. You could be a consultant, you could be a trainer, you could be a number of things. You could fly just for fun. But I think, we could get eventually to a point where the pilot is no longer useful, and for them to, I mean, it's upsetting, You see an industry that changes, and pilots become less useful, but them not being in the, if they have no control, there's no sense in them being in the cockpit to begin with. Just like, once you switch from one type of power to another type of power, eventually either coal miners or oil workers go, they find the jobs.
Right. I agree, but I just don't think that the technology is there yet, and I don't think that the security people will actually, want that to happen. Again, I think it would take decades to change their minds. You remember, okay, again, if I'm a security guy, all right, I'm the guy at the FAA who approves, airplanes, whether they're passable and get a government approved sticker or not, meaning that they can be produced or not. I'm not going to want to have a plane where a pilot cannot make a decision for the better good in a certain extreme situation. That's what there are people who just sit around and think about that. Okay, so even if you have people who want to make the planes pilotless, you will not have government security people who will want that. How
Dude, that's a non-argument for me, because they'll not want it right up until it becomes more practical for them to want it. It's like,
okay, so how would it be practical? Let me ask you this. How would it be practical?
Well, for a number of reasons. Not just that. It's not just that it's impractical now in terms of costs. It might be more practical when computing is there, when the technology is there.
I'm not talking about cost. I'm talking about, okay, again, you have a plane, all right, and the pilot finds out there is a nuclear bomb or chemical weapons on that plane. It's headed for the Pentagon right now. You're a pilot. Your decision is either we can all die and thousands of other people, or I can crash this plane.
Yeah, but dude, you're asking me to predict where the technology would go to a place where that becomes a solvable problem.
How would you tell a computer that this is the situation if you have nobody on board to tell it?
I'm saying just because it's inconceivable now doesn't mean it will be. It's like trying to explain to somebody who advocates slavery, well, who's going to pick this cotton, and then try to explain some cotton gin to them, some cotton mill harvesting.
No, because you're making a whole bunch. No, because the cotton gin was a real thing. You're talking about computers with artificial intelligence. Now, if you talk to people who know about artificial intelligence, this is possibly 100 years away. This is not now. Yeah, okay, but in 100 years, come back to me. But today,
I'm not advocating for it now. I'm just saying that it's not inconceivable to imagine. And in fact, all signs point to that's exactly where it's headed.
Right. That I can understand. Okay, so 50, 100, more like 100 years in the future, when we do have artificial intelligence, we can actually make these split-second decisions.
I'm not trying to put a number on it. We're talking about the concept itself. Is it viable? Is it plausible? Is it feasible? Yes.
Sure.
Yes. And yes.
I have a problem with all this as well. I mean, I actually find myself strangely on the Nathaniel side, because I'm usually the one that advocates for the technology and this sort of thing. But a computer that's sophisticated enough to be able to deal with a nuclear bomb threat and know what to do, isn't this a computer that is also sophisticated enough to become a terrorist in itself if it wants to? Aren't we talking about a computer that's potentially sentient in its own right?
Yeah.
I mean.
No. I'm just talking about. I'm talking about the number of personnel in a plane, as Nathaniel quote said. It's getting cutthroat, and competition continues to drive forces to make it who's ever adopting the most profitable technology is the one who's got an edge against their competition. I'm talking about pure number of personnel on the plane. Where possible, an airline is going to try to cut down on that number and try to cut costs. That's all I'm saying. So when it becomes possible to do that, they're going to cut those guys out. If they're a redundant force on their payroll.
No, again, because they're not the ones making the ultimate decision. Those security guys who approve the plans are the ones who are making that decision. And right now, you cannot get a security guy to say a pilotless plane is a good idea.
Sure, I can. If I can get him to say a driverless cars, why can't I?
Guys are overlooking something. Why, as if it is impossible to have a very intelligent computer fly the plane, and in special cases like perhaps some kind of disaster in the plane itself, it could still very well be possible to remotely tell the computer to do something, and you basically see that now happening too with drones. Of course, they are flying the plane, but drones are fully automated, but the person on the ground still can tell the drone to go and do something specifically.
Right.
So in the case of a nuclear threat and the plane is flying to a dangerous area, it could still be possible to tell the plane from on the ground go to another direction. And
how would the person
that's what I'm talking about.
The trouble is, if we're having planes that can now respond to remote communications, then that opens a whole possibility for hackers.
It does because our drones have actually been hacked from time to time.
Yeah, I think you're confused on what it is I'm advocating. I'm talking more about what George is talking about. I'm talking about a plane that communicates with one person monitoring a whole fleet of planes instead of having just one pilot per one plane. I'm talking about one guy on the ground and a plane. I'm not talking about no personnel on the plane whatsoever from the airline. I'm just talking about reducing that personnel continually. That's all I'm talking about.
You could still basically have a navigator on the plane that has a radio and that communicates with the ground.
I'm just saying, do we need 4 or 5 people? Do we need as many stewardesses? Do we need as many pilots? I'm just saying, in the future, definitely not. It's not going to happen. There's not going to be. I just don't see it. I don't see how you don't see how all the evidence suggests that that's exactly the direction it's heading, towards less and less people in these roles that can be automated. That's
I guess you could argue that no one's going to have sex in the future because there'll probably be a way of being able to have children without doing it.
You ever watch Woody Allen's Sleeper? The Orgasmatron classic. You have to watch that movie.
Well, they make interesting robots in Japan, I saw. So
yeah.
Listen,
I agree with you that in 100 years from now, who knows? But in today's day and age, and in 10 years from now, you are not going to get people who are in the security services who have to design.
Why you keep saying security like there's some conspiratorial, like they can block all legislation and they can block all sort of technological? Why you keep talking about
look, these planes have to be approved by the government. You can't just build a plane and say I'm going to fly a plane. You know, these are regulated.
You're not going to hear any arguments from me that the government won't stand in the way or be behind the ball on that. I'm all on board with you on that. I'm just saying, will the technology make it there? Will it be overwhelming? Will the pressure from airlines trying to pressure the government to allow them to do it, like Amazon with a drone? But I mean, by the time they wanted to do it and got approval for it, it's useless now. But I'm saying, will the industry pressure on the government be overwhelming at some point? I think it will.
Well, I think
I might add, by the way, that there is a company that has been, I think, for the last 15 years, trying to make a flying car, a real flying car that is completely robotic. Okay, because their vision of the future was that the reason why the flying car never made it was because it relies on the human component, and most people don't know how to fly, and it's very expensive to take flying lessons, etc. That's one of the reasons they saw as the flying car never taking off. So their solution was to make an entirely robotic car. The government has yet to approve this idea. They've made it. Okay, this thing is like a hop-to-hop place. Now, the government was very interested in taking this for their military, but they won't approve it for civilian use because they don't trust the computer enough not to crash the plane over in the middle of the suburbs or the city or what have you. So on the battlefield, great idea. But in the civilian area, no, they're not going to go there. They're not going to touch it.
The government's been behind the ball on a ton of shit. Name the issue, and the government takes a long time to adopt the idea that I'm more than 3/5 of a human. I mean, you're not going to get any argument from me that the government's behind the ball on shit, but do they eventually get it right when the pressure is overwhelming? Yes.
I would say that not necessarily the pressure, but when the technology is correct. I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Leonardo da Vinci designed helicopters and designed tanks, but it took 300 years for those things ever coming real. Of course, we don't have the technology at this moment, but like I said, perspective of computers and the experience people will have with computers in a few decades will change. Certainly.
Right.
When I only have to look at my mother, not my mother, that's a Dutch word, at my mother, and. And see how she interacts and thinks about computers. She thinks it's disgusting. The internet, she doesn't understand it. I only lived for 2 decades with her. And I totally trust computers. I like the internet. And it's just a matter of perspective and an attitude change. And the proper technology you would need for something as things like that to be feasible.
Right. I agree. I agree with that. But again, the technology has to be there, and artificial intelligence is nowhere close to that, really. I mean,
No, not at the moment, no.
yeah.
Uh,
So I
I
just
like.
don't see it happening anytime soon. I just don't.
I kind of see it being more akin to a drone type of switchover, where rather than having the pilot in the cockpit on the plane, you have somebody like Rethink was saying, where maybe it's one person on the ground that's managing, maybe it for one plane, but taking the pilot out of the plane would be a first step, um, at least in computerizing the whole situation. At least from if you look at it militarily, the reason the push for me it seemed to me that the push for drones, the technology was that you could make them smaller, lighter, more fuel efficient. They could go further. They could stay aloft longer, and at the same token, they could remain hidden because they are smaller. And the other thing is that because you don't have to put a pilot in it, if there's anything where the thing gets shot down or it gets hacked or something occurs, then you at least don't have a dead soldier or a prisoner. So it cuts
Right.
your risk, your human risk down quite a bit. I think sometime in the future we'll see where the public recognizes that the computer might help to prevent them from being the casualty of a lone nut pilot or a terrorist or what have you. They might see that as a larger threat than the technology itself, and then you'll see the adoption of that technology where a pilot flies the plane from the ground because that's where the passengers would rather have him be, even if it means an extra $5
You know who's
on your
gonna be,
ticket at first.
and you know who's gonna be among those early adopters are cheap asses like me that only want a cheap ass plane ticket and don't really care who's flying it.
I'll
And
sit
just
next
take-
to you.
Exactly. I'll see you there.
Yeah, but
The
remember,
thing about these computers that surprises me, I mean, they can sometimes behave in rather unpredictable ways. So one thing that I think is really cool is that they programmed the computer to learn how to play Tetris. So it wasn't a computer that would just play Tetris perfectly, because obviously that you can easily do that. But it was a program that was designed to learn. So it didn't know anything about Tetris. It had to learn how to play it as it went along. And obviously, to begin with, it started off bad, and then it would get better at playing the Tetris. But the interesting thing was the computer obviously wanted to win the games. And when it played at first and it was really, really bad, it did something that no one expected it to do. Just as it was about to lose, it paused the game, because the computer reasoned that since I can't win normally, I don't want to lose, so I'm going to just pause the game, and then that counts as being better than losing. And no one expected that the computer would do that. But I mean, to me, that's just remarkable how a computer would be able to. I mean, someone said, I mean, computers are just so logical. They do things that you just wouldn't expect sometimes.
it's like war games, man.
Yeah.
You know, no, listen, again, I'm a huge advocate of technology. I actually think that wearable Google Glass type of stuff will actually come into the future. And not only that, I think that implants are in fact the wave of the future, 30 years from now.
Well, I saw.
Sort of pro implants, though, because I'm all for technology. I mean, I quite like the idea of having a personal robot servant, that sort of thing. That kind of strikes me. But actually having an implant under the skin or something.
I've actually made the argument that Rethink was making about people accepting technology with gradual increase in trust. That implants to us to almost all of us would be inconceivable, but to our grandchildren, they would have no problem with it. I've made this argument many times. But the fact is that we're talking about technology that is so far in the future. Really, it's got nothing to do with people right now are looking for ways to prevent this from happening again. My view, my opinion, based on everything that I know, is simply that this is not possible to prevent in the near future, now or in the near future. Down the road, perhaps, when we do have pilotless planes, 50, 100 years from now, most likely 100, then yeah, you're talking about a completely
numbers.
different world.
100. I don't think it's that far off. You come up with these bold numbers.
Because if you talk to people in AI, you will see that most people who work in AI, they will accept that we may have some sort of an artificial intelligence machine 20 years from now, but that it would be like the equivalent of a dog. To get a computer that reacts and thinks and reacts the way a human does with all that information would take at least 100 years. I mean, this is
you took it so much further. I'm not talking about a fully autonomous machine. I'm talking about a machine that can fly itself. If we got driverless cars that can interact with a crowded road, surely a non-crowded sky is not going to be as complicated. I mean, you're talking about a fully autonomous machine. I didn't even take it there. I'm talking about a plane taking off, landing itself, and not running into shit in between there, and that's that. I don't think that's the 100 years off.
Well, again, what if something goes wrong?
Well, can I just take it way back for just 1 second? Because something you said just reminded me of something. If it's the case that this particular individual who flew the plane into the hillside was mentally or physically not fit to do so, and he was given the news that he was not fit to do so, presumably at some point he would have had to notify his employer, or the employer would have been notified by the physician. Why didn't that? I think maybe we could have avoided this, or they could have avoided this very quickly. Or totally by getting that information to the airline quicker. So as soon as you see the patient in the office and you recognize that his eyesight's not so good and he needs more testing, or psychologically he seems a little unstable,
right.
Why can't that data immediately be forwarded to the airline saying, hey, listen, don't let Bob fly today. Don't fire him, but just don't let him fly today. We can work a few things out.
Until further notice.
I would agree with that. Keep the guy on the ground until you have the opportunity to really look things over. And that also gives that person the opportunity to rethink themselves, because a lot of times you have people who make drastic, irrational decisions based on information that they're given immediately. Like oh, sorry, you have cancer, and then they go out and blow their whole wad of money and live life to the fullest, only to find out that, you don't really have cancer. It might be, just enough time to give this guy the opportunity to calm down, chill out, find something else that he might be able to do with his spare time instead of flying planes, if it's the fact that he'll no longer fly planes. But getting that information to his employer probably would have been the first thing that could have saved those people more than anything else we've talked about thus far.
But that's the problem. That's the Big Daddy is watching you issue. The Big Daddy is watching you issue because of the privacy laws.
I think the privacy thing is stop.
In this case, I would agree it would have been a very good idea if the doctor had a right. First, you got to ask the question: did the doctor know he was a pilot? We don't even know that. But in this case, it's arguable to disagree that I mean, that a doctor should be able to contact the company. But there is a lot of potential, of course, for misuse for this kind of things.
That's the problem with having data and having data on everybody, especially when it becomes personal and medical. Because certainly there's certain people you don't want prying in your personal business. But I think when it comes down to public safety, to some degree, you have to keep people safe, and you might need to violate somebody's personal privacy in order to save 150 people. That might just be the case. I mean, we have laws here in the United States where if you turn up to your local physician with a particular sexually transmitted disease, your doctor is by law required to notify the CDC that you are a person with this
but-
illness, and then they have to contact the people that you've been with recently in order to, and they just say, hey, they call the person, they say anonymously, you may or may not have been exposed to somebody who has, let's say, hepatitis C, and you should get yourself tested.
What kind of disease do you want on a list? You want your boss to know of the disease you have, because such a question for me at this moment is kind of personal, because I just found out this week I have something, and I've had it all my life, that I never knew about. Some people in my direct surroundings have suspected it for a long time, and they never told me. I only found out this week that I have it, and I'm 43, so it's very strange for me to find out that I have this. And now I'm struggling with the question, because I'm also in changing jobs. I'm leaving the military, and I'm going to out in the world, in the big world, basically. And I'm struggling now with the question, what do I tell my next boss what I have? Because it does impact me, because I've been struggling with something the last several years, and I didn't know what it was and why it was. And now I know what it is. I'm not gonna tell it in the open what I have. I'll put it in the.
Well, do you feel like flying any planes into mountains?
Well, no, it's not.
If not, I'm okay.
No, it's not going to impact that, but you still have the privacy questions. My doctor knows about it. Is he obligated to tell my next boss that I have this? Because what disease do you want on what you're talking about, the blacklist of diseases bosses need to know about?
I think it depends on the job that you're expected to do, and the number of people who are relying on you to safely perform that job. If you're a bus driver, then I think you probably should have a look over, make sure that you're physically fit enough to make sure that you're not likely going to drive the bus into or over something that you're not supposed to. But balance that risk against, you're at least already on the ground and there's 45, 50 people on the bus, and you can only go so fast, and there's only so many things you can crash into. But balance that against a person who's flying a plane that has 700 and something people on board, or however many people you can pack on a plane, I don't know. With the flip of a switch, you hit you're going towards the ground, and that's pretty much the end of it. So
See, I wouldn't even make the case that somebody needs full disclosure, even if it's not a life or death sort of job. Like, I'll give you guys an example. I used to run a post-production company for like 4 years, and we did work for like Disney and Pixar mostly, like just post-production work, like resequencing, stuff like that. And one of my guys, star player, he's a DJ. I guarantee you've heard of him. I used to manage him like back in the heyday, and I had no idea that he was on the autistic spectrum. He had Asperger's. I always knew he was a little bit socially awkward, a little bit weird, but I had no idea until years later he got himself in a ton of trouble, and basically the writing was on the wall at that point. The company was dead. He got himself banned from the U.S. I mean, he got seriously in trouble because of his impulsive, awkward social decisions, and it was the end of the company. But is that fair to like an employer like me? Should I have the right to know up front that, hey, this guy has like an autistic spectrum disorder? Like, what would you think about that?
I think if it's the death of your company, everybody still survives as a human, and so there's no obligation for him to tell you that he has an illness that might bankrupt you, because you can still carry your life on from there. But if you have an illness or potential handicap that would potentially injure or kill multiple people, then I think that you might, maybe you should reconsider whether or not you should be doing that job first, I guess. And secondly, I think maybe your physician should notify an employer and say, it just wouldn't recommend it. Even if it just, like for this guy, it meant just grounding him for a term to just check him out. You know what I mean? We all have our moments, right? We've all had that moment where you don't live up to your best expectations of yourself. And nobody should be faulted for having those moments, because we all do. But if you're the kind of person where your physician thinks that you shouldn't be in a position to have that kind of control over other people's lives, then your privacy suddenly becomes a little less important to me as the passenger or as the employer, because now look at what these companies are going to have to do again to retrofit either cockpits or computers or pilot training in order to stop this from happening. You know, it's a personal toll of 150 people plus the financial toll of the plane and all the retraining and all the whatevering they need to do plus the investigation. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the plane. I don't care about the company. But the 150 people I care about. And if that could have been prevented by violating this guy's privacy between his doctor and his employer, I'd say go for it. I would actually argue that if I were in a position where I was found to be not safe for other people to be around, that a doctor would notify my employer, only because it probably would save my life as well. I mean, we're talking about 150 people who were innocent who got crashed into the side of the mountain by the hands of somebody who obviously did it on purpose, but we're not considering this guy is probably also a victim of his circumstances as well. We probably could have saved him and the 150 people by just being maybe a little bit more observant and diligent, and in this particular case, maybe violating his privacy. Privacy to me, it's a fine line, but when it comes to life and death, I'd rather you know everything about me than me be dead. Chirp, 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 chirp.
No, I can't disagree with that.
Fair enough.
Win. Well, I gotta get to dinner, guys. Anyway, so I'm gonna leave it with that. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, afternoon, or wherever you're at. I gotta get cooking. But thanks for having me.
Well, that's alright.
Have a good night.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's getting towards the 2 hour mark now. Anyway, incidentally, I don't even know exactly when it is going to be, but Puka is doing a second debate, and it's going to be on his channel this time. I think incidentally he does want you to moderate again. We think. But as far as I understand, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing another debate on his channel.
Okay.
About the same topic still?
Yeah. I mean, we covered an awful lot. I mean, it was. I think the feedback was generally that we went through it very quickly and didn't get to cover a lot of stuff in an awful lot of detail. But
yeah, I saw the debate and I really loved the debate. So, but the only thing I missed, and that's why I contacted you via Google Plus. Because you had a lot of people watching it, and it would be nice, perhaps the next time, if there was an opportunity to let the people who were watching ask certain questions. So
yeah, there's actually we were talking about that. There's actually a Q&A app that we can enable that allows people who aren't necessarily in the room but watching. They can they can type questions in there. So we're gonna get that enabled next time, definitely.
I think also what's going to happen is that. I'll do it. I mean, because obviously I can't post the link publicly because realistically I know what will happen if I do that. There'll be 10 people in the Hangout and people will be yelling at each other. So what I thought about doing is doing the way that the Magic Sandwich Show does it. So people can send Skype contact requests, and if they want to come in, I think that's probably the best way of doing it because it just keeps it from getting too chaotic. But I think there's interest in doing that. Incidentally, there was the thing that really surprised me is it wasn't the most viewed episode that we've done. I mean, there have been a couple that have got more views, but the number of comments left. I mean, it was something like 950 comments, which is like the entire. I mean, it's quite a lot. So there was obviously some interest there, but it's quite a controversial topic. So it's interesting to debate it.
Well, it's a very heartwarming subject, and a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on it, and me too. And I said it in one or two comments on the video somewhere too. That feminism as a subject does not interest me, but I am also a gamer, so the combination interests me, and so I watch Thunderfoot's videos a lot and not bothered commenting. I've not twittered about it so far, only 1 or 2 weeks ago. It's an interesting topic because it links it links feminism, it links free thinkers, atheists, a lot of people with strong opinions on basically how humanity should be, how do we interact with women, and then yeah. And I think that's why it's such a strong subject, because it has so many small aspects to it that they're all combined in that one topic. So
I think also with this sort of atheist movement, in a sort of odd way. I mean, I know that it caused a massive rift. I mean, it really got people at each other's throats. So in that way, it sort of caused a lot of animosity between people. So it probably wasn't a good thing there. But in some ways, it was a good thing, because I mean, you can only talk about creationists for so long before it gets boring. So this is sort of like the injection of drama that sort of made it dynamic and interesting again.
Wait, can I just ask something, because I was not privy to this debate and I haven't been following. What was the debate about exactly? Was it Atheism Plus or something, or what?
No, I mean it was myself and people essentially arguing whether feminism was a good thing or not. I mean, it was a fairly broad type of debate.
Yeah, it's not a debate I'm generally involved in, frankly.
it's up on the channel, so you can always look it back. So
Yeah.
Looking forward to the second one, and I agree about the Atheism Plus thing. It definitely drove a wedge, and I definitely agree that there's some parallels between this gamer issue and that. It seems like history's repeating itself. So I think it was a good topic, and even though I have my opinions, I tried to be a fair mod, so it sounded like I did all right doing that. So happy to do it again.
I mean, I'm quite interested in politics. I mean, I think there's a lot of. I mean, I don't know. Some people will disagree with me, but I think there's a lot of politics involved in this issue. So I think it's really quite an interesting thing to discuss. I mean, for instance, I think right-wing feminists are fairly rare. I mean, you don't often get libertarian type you know, the sort of political views tend to be fairly left-wing. I mean, whereas of course you can get people that don't call themselves feminists that are sort of left-wing as well. So it's just interesting, the sort of politics that comes with it. That's what I found.
I think by and large, yeah, I don't think I've ever met a completely right-wing feminist before. In that vein, not I mean, in the, yes, it depends how you define feminism, I suppose, but yeah, I've never met a revolutionary type of feminist who is on the right wing. Never have.
On the BBC, I saw that there was once a debate. I mean, this was really interesting because I've never seen it before. But there was a debate between a left-wing feminist and there was actually a right-wing feminist, well, at least a conservative feminist, because in the UK the Conservative Party is the right-wing party.
Right.
It's mainstream, so by right-wing it is still probably it's a long way left of the Republicans. But it was interesting because it was the first sort of it was a right-wing feminist versus a left-wing feminist on feminist type issues, and it was really quite interesting because I never seen anything like it before.
Aside from religion, I've never seen anything with more denominations or sort of divisions internally than I have with feminism.
Well, I mean this is what makes it interesting, though. Surely, I mean this is why people are interested in religion as well. And I mean I think there's a lot of parallels to be drawn here. So I think it's a really interesting topic, if not a very controversial one. But.
Yeah, it's also fascinating because you have feminists that are totally free. Just in the Netherlands, you had that early feminist movements back in the 70s too, of women wanting the same rights as men. And in the Netherlands, we have that now to a degree, but there are still difference between the male society and the female society, to kind of pillar it in two ways. But there is also a religious movement of women who basically want to stay in the kitchen and want to stay at home, and it's fascinating to see that that you have women thinking like that and women that think totally different, and it's yeah, there's those kind of aspects where you think to yourself on, yeah, what a strange world we live in. You live in a country where you can be totally free, but you give up that freedom to live in a life to God and to your husband, and stay at home. But when you ask these women about it, they say no, but we are free and we have full choice. And
Hmm.
strange. But I especially liked Puka on the fact because he comes from a very social background, a social moving background, and he brought in that aspect in the Super Side Center show that I've never seen before. So I really liked the discussion last week. And I really think you did an excellent job of modding the discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, Nathaniel, if you haven't seen it, check it out. I thought it was pretty good. Looking forward to the follow-up. Just needs to be a little bit more concise because it was way too broad last time. It was like all over the place, but I think it's definitely a good talk. So.
I'm not sure I know who Puka is, but okay.
He's also made a video about the debates. That's probably worth checking out.
Hmm.
I'll probably put a link to that video in the description. But from the comments that I got, the comments were still pretty polarized. I think the sort of funny thing was that he came across to me as fairly moderate, and a lot of the comments were, I guess, a little bit more radical that we had during the debate. I mean, from looking at the comments, they're either very much in his camp or very much in my camp. There aren't really any sort of agnostic type people. I mean, it is one camp or the other, really. And I don't know. It's sort of. Are there any agnostics with respect to feminism? It's not something I've really come across, but I suspect there are. But
I don't know if I'm agnostic. I don't know what that would mean. I don't see. Yeah, this is a sort of debate that I really don't see what the point is, quite frankly. I just this whole thing just really it stumped me. You know, I should clarify, I am on Thunderfoot's side. I absolutely 100% completely. I didn't take any interest whatsoever in the whole Gamergate. I couldn't have given a shit less. Okay, it did not interest me at all. I watched a few of the videos on the Gamergate from Thunderfoot, and I guess a couple of other people, not many. It was so. It's such a petty fucking topic. If the, you know,
I don't think
I'll go up on a rant here, but you know, this is a first world fucking problem.
It definitely is.
I'm talking about ISIS, where people are getting their fucking heads cut off with a blunt fucking knife, and people are bitching whether or not women are portrayed in a certain way in video games.
Right.
I'm
No, I
sorry.
totally.
You know what? If that's your concern in the world, fuck you.
Yeah.
That's my point. All right.
I totally agreed with Thunderfoot too, but I think as somebody who games, it's totally a first world problem. No, there's no denying that. It's totally a first world issue, and it's very trite in the grand scheme of things. But when you see this kind of injection of gendered politics where it doesn't need to be in a sort of meritocracy space, it's sort of the same argument that we need more women in tech, we need more women CEOs, we need more parity, we need more, like always, and it's just asserted and reasserted without establishing why equality of outcome is necessarily a good thing, and that's the question that these kind of debates kind of get to. But I agree, it can be pointless because a lot of them aren't interested in answering that objectively or having an honest conversation about that. But I think this Puka guy was, so that's why I think it was good to indulge him in that and sort of get his perspective.
Okay, fine. I'm not, it's not. I'm not against people having the debates. I just was utterly uninterested in it. I have to say, it's kind of like people who discuss Justin Bieber. You know,
Yeah.
it could not be more vapid to me in that respect.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. For me too. I think we're all agreeing with it. Most of here seem to be on Thunderfoot side, and me too. Am I a feminist? Well, I am a feminist in the way that I like the feminist movement of the 70s, but I basically say the modern feminism, the extreme feminist you see these days, like Anita Sarkeesian on her video games. I've been playing video games since the 70s, so that's almost 3 decades, or more than 3 decades. I always say I'm not a feminist, I'm for equality. But you have to recognize, and that came up last week too, that there is a difference between females and males, and you have to recognize that, and you can't ask 100% equality because males and females are not 100% the same biologically.
I agree.
I think there's a trend basically in the first world to drum up problems where there are like I don't know whether people heard of this Coney 2012 thing. Obviously,
yeah, who didn't?
I mean, well, when that came out, I was immediately skeptical of it. I wasn't prepared to say one way or the other. I didn't know whether it was a good thing or not. But all over social media and everything, it was all Coney 2012. Everyone was doing it. There was like links to the YouTube video everywhere. You had to see this video, and I'm bloody glad that I didn't get on the bandwagon because it turned out to be a complete car crash. The charity was corrupt. That the guy that was in charge of it was pretty dodgy himself.
Yeah.
I saw him on like TMZ.
At all. Yeah. You know.
So I mean, I'm very, very glad I reserved judgment on that one because it turned out it couldn't have gone more wrong. I mean, you think that you get these things that it's got to be a good cause. It's charity, but no, it was first world slacktivism. It wasn't charity. It was a charity pretending to care when all they really cared about is their own public image. It was pretty despicable actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I was not on that bandwagon at all. You can check my social media. I did not post a damn thing about it.
I'm so glad I didn't. I wasn't even tempted though, so
Yeah.
I don't get tempted. But so many people were doing it. It was.
Well, it's. I mean, look at social media. All right. I hate to actually call it media. I don't want to dignify it with that word. But look at social media. Look at what people repost. Just the most inane bullshit and crap you can imagine. And frankly, a good half of it, I would imagine, is not even true. It's just made up bullshit. And they repost it as if it's true. So, does that surprise me? Does it surprise me that people have all these issues that they come out with that they think are really important and they keep reposting just for hits? No, it doesn't surprise me. It's just a an empty culture half the time, or maybe more than half. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving it too much credit. How many times have you seen the people repost the same kind of crap about religious arguments over and over again in social media? It's ridiculous, and they repost it as if it's some sort of truth. It's just utterly ridiculous, frankly. And they do this with every single topic they come across. So no, color me unimpressed.
I think things like BuzzFeed are worse though because it's the clickbait fucking trash that you get on places like BuzzFeed.
I hate those. I hate those fucking websites.
Yes. 15 reasons that that you went to community. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they are.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. It's just it's ridiculous, frankly. Sorry, I had to pause for a second because I'm trying to kill a dragon right now. I know this comes out of.
Hey, you need me for that. My name is George St. St. George, I kill dragons.
I'm playing Skyrim right now and I'm killing a dragon. I do play games. It just again, I have I recognize that I'm very privileged for being able to do so. Anyway, again, it was utterly uninteresting to me, this whole argument, and I think people who go on about it are really just they really should have better things to argue.
I think what scared me the most about it was the potential that they were exerting over on the front end, on the developers, on the game makers, and I like the game stories the way they are. I don't care if the protagonist is white or male or straight. I never cared about that shit. And the fact that it was like a cacophony of people that were pressuring these companies to start.
The thing that you have to see is that there's one force that's just more powerful than any of this, and this one force has been. It basically means that all their efforts are futile, and that's the free market. If people don't want to buy it, then it's not going to get bought. If a company wants to commit financial suicide by making a game that no one wants to play, then let them do it.
Yeah.
It's only going to damage themselves. So.
One of the funniest things I thought that Anita Sarkeesian 1 or 2 years ago got a prize for her efforts within the gaming industry, blah blah blah, something like that. That was set up by by game producers and game companies. And all the feminists went wild on. You see, we are right because our feminists in video games and the video games industry recognizes that females are oppressed in games and blah blah blah. They went crazy about it. But if I was a director of a gaming company, knowing that you have people like feminists like Anita Sarkeesian making these outrageous videos of male dominance and female suppression in video games, I would give her a prize too, basically to keep in the group of feminists friendly to my games. So for me, I would give her a prize, knowing that in the future I will still be selling other games.
Again,
it makes commercial sense to give her a prize.
Again, I was utterly uninterested. I've never actually watched Anita Sarkeesian apart from when she's on Thunderfoot's videos. So
I think we should stop here before we bore the family to death.
Let's face it. Is this the sort of person I really should give a shit about, or what she does? No, I've got better things to do, really, frankly.
Did anyone see the eclipse incidentally? I mean, I know you're all in different countries, but
the what?
The solar eclipse.
Oh, it only showed 2% here or something. So no, I didn't watch it. I mean, I watched it on TV, but not live. If it had been 50% or more, I probably would have gone out with a pinhole camera type of thing and looked at it, but it wasn't even close to that here. It was 2%, I think it would have shown.
I was fucking pissed because I have a telescope and I've got a solar filter, but it was fucking misty. So I couldn't see anything.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I don't know whether I should be pleased about this because I have a sadistic joy in this, but in the UK, that on the day of the eclipse, the vast majority of the UK was cloudy, and there was 5% of the UK that wasn't, and I happened to be in the perfect spot which was completely stunning, and no one else was, and I had the perfect view of it. I had a solar filter. I even got some good photographs of it, and everyone else was saying it's fucking cloudy, but
Quantum, if I ever meet you in person, I'll kill you.
It was, for me, it was great. It was about 95%. It got a little bit dark, so that was quite good. It was at least as good as the 1999 one, which I still remember. And I got it was perfectly blue skies. But as far as I can tell, I was the only person in the UK that could say that because everyone else was cloudy. So yeah. And just after the eclipse finished, that's when the cloud came in. So I was so lucky. I got a really good view of it.
Well, the next one is going to be in 10 or 12 years, something like that.
I want to see that. I want to see the totality there. I think for the next one, I'm going to go drive the Spain.
By the next one, I'll just take my self autonomous plane above the clouds.
Let's not start that again. I mean, I like disagreement, but you know.
No, actually, I remember when I was in university, there was a total eclipse, and I was actually in an astronomy class at that time, and we all went up to the roof at George Washington University, and the professor had this really nice telescope set up, and with the solar filters, etc. And we watched it live. It was almost a total eclipse for us. It was really impressive, frankly. I'll never forget that. That was real. I just happened to be in a astronomy class when that happened, so I got lucky. I'd never seen another one just like that,
It was in America?
So,
you saw that?
Yeah, it was in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
This
nice.
is the 1990s. And it wasn't a total eclipse for us. I forget how covered the sun was, but it was a really actually decent eclipse for us. So we watched it with a telescope, and it was really kind of cool, frankly, because it magnified it enough for you to see like all sorts of detail, which was just fantastic to watch. So I'll never forget that. I never actually did end up using a pinhole box. You know how they tell you to make one to watch the thing. I never actually ended up doing that. So, the only one I've ever seen was actually through a really nice telescope. So maybe I'm lucky too.
Vandervoort made a nice video about the eclipse, by the way. So.
Yeah, I saw that. But yeah, here I think it was covered like 2% or something ridiculously small. I can't remember. So it wasn't really worth it to go out and try to look at it, because without a really good telescope, you wouldn't have noticed a difference apparently. So
this is an interesting thing. So obviously a total eclipse is the thing that you want to see. But there's an even rarer type of eclipse. Okay, so there's two main types. There's the total eclipse, and then there's the annular eclipse, where the annular eclipse, the moon isn't actually big enough to cover the sun, so it only covers it. So you actually get the moon that's actually inside the sun. So the sun doesn't cover it. But there's an even rarer type called a hybrid, and with a hybrid, the moon is basically exactly the same size as the sun. But because of the fact that the moon's angular distance isn't constant, in a hybrid eclipse, it can actually transition from an annular to a total. And there was, I think it was like a couple of years ago now, that it was the last hybrid eclipse for a century, and the point at which it transitioned from an annular to a hybrid was actually settled. So these people actually went to the point at which the annular eclipse transitioned into the hybrid eclipse, and they could actually see the moon going across the sun. And the sun was still shining, and then the moon would appear to grow actually inside the sun, and then it would become a total eclipse, and that's basically the most impressive eclipse that you could possibly get. But it's insanely. I mean, you must be insanely lucky to have ever seen something like that. But yeah.
No, I never have. But you know what I want to know, though, would be really interesting to find out. The way they tell you not to look at a solar eclipse, because basically you'll burn your eyes out. I wonder how many people became blind, hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, simply because they didn't know that. So every time there was like a solar eclipse, you would end up having like thousands of blind people in your area or something. I don't know. I wonder if people knew that it was dangerous because other people had gone blind, or if they just had no clue.
I mean, people intuitively know not to look at the sun, I guess. So I mean,
yeah, but when you see an eclipse, I mean, if you don't know that you shouldn't look at it, then it's not evident.
Yeah. I was just about to say, but the thing is, you can actually look at a total eclipse with the naked eye without doing any damage to your eyes. I think the reason that they tell you not to do it, and the reason why it's so dangerous, is because obviously during a total eclipse it goes dark.
Right.
So when you look at the total eclipse, you see the faint corona of the sun. So your pupils actually dilate to let more light in, because the eclipse is, it's quite difficult to see.
Right.
And since an eclipse only lasts for sometimes only 10, 20, 30 seconds, the sun suddenly comes back out, and you're not just looking directly at the sun as if that wasn't bad enough, but you're looking directly at the sun after coming out of what was essentially a very, very dark place. So you're getting it even worse than you would get if you were just looking at the sun. So I reckon. So yeah, I guess possibly there would have been. You could imagine that people, when people didn't understand what eclipses were, they would look at this with horror, like the black sun is coming, the world is about to end, and they'd be looking at this, and then bam, they'd get it right in the face.
That's what I'm saying. I think there must have been, during ancient times, a lot of people that went blind during an eclipse simply because they just looked up and they couldn't stop staring at the damn thing. It's a normal human reaction to look up at what's going on and just to sort of stare at it. So I can imagine it must have been pretty horrific, the consequences of it during ancient times. I don't know.
The retina does have a certain ability to repair itself to a certain degree, of course. So.
Yeah,
but I suppose back at the time, when it would have healed, they would have been eaten by, I don't know, saber-toothed tigers or something like that.
The worst thing about it is that you can't really tell when the damage is being done, because you don't really feel pain.
Right.
So actually, about a month ago, about a month ago now, I was working with a laser, which is, it wasn't a particularly powerful laser, but it was, and I caught a stray reflection in my eye, and it was only for a couple of seconds, but you can just imagine that, it wasn't painful at all, but it's just so dangerous, because you just, all it takes is one mistake, and in your eyesight, you can't get it back. Your eyesight's ruined. So,
right.
It's.
That's why you wear those laser goggles every time you go into a lab.
Actually, in this case, in the case that I'm describing, it was very difficult to wear. Well, we did actually have laser goggles, but the problem was that you kind of need to see the laser, in order to set the experiment up. You need to see where the laser was. So,
yeah.
So
we'll call you Quantum LaForge from now on.
Yeah.
But no, it was just I just caught a stray reflection for it was probably less than a second, but you just got to be so careful, and it's just you're so close to going blind all the time. Anyway,
yeah.
We probably should finish now because we're about half an hour over. So
are we still live? Oh yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are still live.
But yeah, I'll put the link to Puka's video in the description. As always, make sure you add this version of me if you want to get a fortnightly invite, and we'll close off now. Bye bye, everyone.